All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting of the Missoula Board of County Commissioners on this Thursday, June 20th. I'd like to call today's meeting to order, and please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Missoula County acknowledges that this event today takes place in the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. Cheryl, you have some closed captioning announcements for us.
Hello, everyone. If you're joining us for this meeting virtually today, instructions for turning on closed captioning are on your screen. If you're joining us in person, we'll have closed captioning on all the screens here in the Sophie Moise room. There will be an opportunity to speak during the meeting for public comment virtually and in person. We ask that all speakers today speak slowly and clearly. This helps with the accuracy of the closed captioning. If you're on Microsoft Teams, if you'd like to speak when discussion has been open for public comment, we ask that you use the raise hand feature. This is the small hand button. If you're calling in on the phone, you'll need to hit *5 to raise your hand. Once called upon, you'll need to hit *6 to unmute. If you have any questions, please find me during the meeting. We also have assisted listening devices available. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. We only have one item on the agenda here in a moment that we'll talk about, and that is the Western Materials gravel pit use variance. But is there anything else at this time that is not on the agenda that folks would like to comment on? Any public comment on items not on today's agenda? And if you're online, please use the raise hand function if you'd like to comment. Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Our current claims list, and this would be claims received as of May 29th through June 11th, 2024 by the Commissioner's Office totaled $5,037,296.66. We have one public hearing today that will be heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So at this time, I'm going to do something that's a little unique for the Board of County Commissioners and unique for the public also, and that is I'm going to recess the Board of County Commissioners and convene and call to order a meeting of the Missoula Planning and Zoning Commission to hear this item, which again is the Western Materials gravel pit use variance, and we will begin with a staff report and a staff update from Jenny Dixon.
Thank you very much. Let me get. So this is I believe the fourth hearing on this use variance request for property located south of Lolo at the Western Materials gravel operation. The use variance, as you recall, is to expand their operations to the west from a current 66-acre pit to a 96-acre pit. We have provided you with findings and conclusions that support a recommendation of approval from staff, subject to 3 conditions. The first condition actually has about 12 sub conditions. So I guess in reality, it's about 15 conditions of approval. And at the last hearing, we submitted a revision to several of those conditions. I can, at any point during this meeting, bring those up for you to look at if you decide you want to talk about those conditions. Also, would just point out, sorry, slide. This proposal, as shown in this slide, and I'm not going to, it's weird. Oh, there it is. I'm not going to expand this because I may need to jump to a couple other slides, but I just wanted to show you that this is the scenario that of the development of this site should the variance be approved. An ultimate reclamation would result in the image on the right side of the screen which is 110 acres that are shown like in the check marks or little marks as open area with a development footprint of 40 acres that would allow 40 homes. And the reason I'm bringing this up again today is to just let you know about a new comment letter from Parks, Trails, and Open Lands with respect to this proposal. Their initial recommendation and comment letter back in November indicated that they did not support this variance. And as of yesterday, with a new letter in the civic clerk packet for you, and not sure if anyone is on from PTOL, but in essence, they recognize that this still has impacts. However, with this mitigation, as this is shown here, they have withdrawn their opposition or recommendation for denial and instead are neutral on the request, identifying that there will still be impacts, but there will be impacts regardless of the approval of the variance. So, and I think with that, I'll leave it to the rest of the public and the applicant to present, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. So the way we're going to work this morning before the Planning and Zoning Commission is we'll begin with the applicant or applicant's representative providing an update to us. We asked specifically a couple of things at the last meeting, and one was that the applicant or applicant's legal counsel and the Carlton Protection Trust legal counsel talk to one another in the interim. I do not know if that has happened or not. And then we also asked that the process be initiated to do some water quality or water resource studies and analysis in this area. So if we begin with the applicant or applicant's representative, come on up. And once we get through this portion, we will have an opportunity for the public to comment, and I will reiterate this later. We're looking for new information today. If all you're going to do is simply reiterate what you've said before, we have that on the record and have already heard that. So no need to bring up those points again. So, sir.
Good morning. I'm John Kappas. I'm president of Western Excavating.
And you might need to just kind of eat that mic a little bit there. Thank you.
Is that better?
Much better.
Okay. The past 3 meetings, we've detailed the specifics of this resource and the site and the special conditions that make this site suitable for expansion. So today I'm going to run through just a quick summary of those conditions. Then I will provide an update of what's happened since last meeting and then offer some additional mitigation to address some of the outstanding concerns. So why should this site be allowed to expand? First of all, there's limited resource. The Missoula community is built over its gravel resources, and current resources in the Missoula area are at their end of life or approaching the end. Reduce construction costs for the community. To replace this source, new pits will need to be developed with costs associated with permitting, equipment, and new infrastructure, and require hauling from further distances, increasing costs to community construction projects. There's reduced environmental impacts. This resource requires less energy to extract than other pits that must dredge or use heavy equipment to mine. The source is easily extracted from the banks with a loader. Less hauling time to Missoula area reduces trucking impacts to the environment, and the extraction is not in the groundwater or floodplain, and plants are already permitted, so no additional plants are needed to utilize the resource. It's a known source. This site is relied on for all types of construction projects in the Missoula area and meets construction standards for city, county, and state projects. The source is unique in being able to provide aggregates for all phases of construction, including subbase, base, concrete, and asphalt. And there's mitigation of impacts. The topography allows the resource to be extracted from the floor of the site, which mitigates noise, dust, and visibility. Zoning provides the county with the ability to require additional conditions not currently in place on this site. And if a source is found in neighboring non-zoned areas, the county would not have the ability to require mitigation. And the mitigation proposed also provides reclamation benefits to wildlife and the surrounding area. So efforts since the last meeting. We've tried to set up a meeting with representatives of CPT, but we were never able to get a time or date from them. So our attorneys for Western and CPT have discussed concerns regarding the expansion that could be mitigated. CPT's concerns are with public health and safety issues, mainly air quality and water quantity and quality. Regarding air quality, we are required annually to obtain air quality permits for our concrete, asphalt, and processing plants. Those permits are regulated by the county through site visits to assure mitigation efforts are in place to meet the county's air quality regulations. Missoula is one of only 3 counties in Montana that has regulation over these types of plants for air quality. In addition, asphalt plants must have an independent stack test study performed every 5 years to obtain that annual permit. Regarding the water, we engaged an independent firm, GSI Environmental, to study the groundwater. Dave Rue from GSI is here today to provide a scope and update to the progress of that study. CPT has yet to engage their own hydrologist, but we have agreed to share our results of our study with CPT. While no additional mitigation suggestions have been provided by CPT, we are willing to offer up the following mitigation based on concerns heard during the last hearing and the ongoing discussions. We believe this additional mitigation resolves outstanding concerns we've heard. To address pit reclamation certainty and to prevent ongoing concrete and asphalt production as seen in other pits in Missoula, we propose that we will not process any pit run from other gravel pits at the site. Any material that may be needed for mix designs in our plants from other gravel pits must be processed elsewhere and hauled in. We will limit processed materials hauled in from other gravel pits to 20% of the annual production of our plants. This will ensure that when the pit is out of gravel resource, it will no longer be able to produce concrete or asphalt. A question asked by this commission in the last hearing had us relook at our reclamation plan. An initial mitigation we proposed was to not have production plants move into the expanded area. However, since then, the buffer zones have been added as mitigation. These zones will prevent the plants from being sited any closer to residences in the new expanded area. So if we remove the production plant mitigation and allow the production plants to move into the expanded area, we then could agree to reclaiming the same amount of acreage as we expand into. So the bonded area for extraction will remain the same size as it is today. The pit will never get larger. The only additional bonded land would be for the wildlife corridors, which would not be used for extraction. They would remain vegetated and only used for future reclamation to slope into the dedicated spaces. Currently, the mobile asphalt plant is not at the site. So prior to placing an asphalt plant at the site, we would install monitoring wells to monitor water quality. From the water study, GSI is recommending that we have 2 water monitoring wells on the west border of the expansion area prior to expansion. So prior to expanding into the new area, we will install 2 groundwater monitoring wells on the westmost boundary of the site. If there are no questions of me, then I will turn this over to Dave from GSI so he can.
Yeah, looks like we have a question.
Just want to make sure I understood you at the opening of your remarks where you said you all weren't able to find a time to speak with the CPT's attorneys.
We weren't able to meet as parties, but our attorneys have had discussions through
Okay, great.
conversations and emails.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Rue with GSI Environmental. I'm a principal hydrogeologist there. I've got 19 years of hydrogeology consulting experience. I'm also a licensed geologist and hydrogeologist in the state of Washington. That's only because Montana has no such program. So Western engaged us after the previous hearing to do some more detailed groundwater studies at the site. Some of the stakeholder concerns related to both groundwater quality and quantity impacts. Since then, we have taken a look at the site. We have visited it several times, and we have installed some electronic water level monitoring equipment, which allowed us to determine the groundwater flow direction beneath the pit. If you can see this map up here, I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen. But basically, we installed electronic water level monitoring equipment in 3 of Western's existing wells. Those sensors recorded water levels at a high frequency and time, and we were able to determine a time period at which all those wells were at rest and they hadn't pumped for a period of 48 hours. So what this map shows is sort of a static water table surface. What we found is that the groundwater under the site flows to the east with a slight southeast component. Groundwater under the existing pit does not flow towards any of the developments to the south. As you might expect, groundwater under the pit flows towards the Bitterroot River. What that means is that the existing activities or the proposed expansion are extremely unlikely to have any water quality or quantity impacts for the folks that live south of the site. The other work that we're planning on doing is we are going to move some of the water level monitoring equipment to Western's existing wells that they use for water supply on the south end of the site. We will record water levels during several pumping cycles to determine how far away other water levels may be impacted by Western's operations. We do not expect that the pumping cone of depression will extend to any neighboring wells, but that's what we're not trying to guess, we're trying to prove. So that hasn't been completed yet, but these water level sensors have only been installed for about a week. As you guys know, the last meeting wasn't too long ago, so we've been trying to move quickly. But I'll take any questions from attendees or anyone on the commission.
Okay, thank you. We do have a question. Commissioner Slotnick.
So to what degree would seasonal changes in groundwater levels affect your results?
So we, like I said, the sensors have been in there for a week, and still at this time of the year, I think you all know, we've had quite a wet spring. So the water levels are still slightly coming up. So we have not yet captured seasonal high groundwater for this year. I expect that will occur in the next few weeks. These sensors are still there. They're recording right now. So we will be able to verify when that occurs and what the seasonal high is. As to how it might, what the flow patterns might be in the winter, I think it's fairly safe to say that the groundwater's going to flow basically the same direction. There may be several degrees of variance, but it's not going to turn around and flow uphill in the winter. We can be pretty sure of that.
Thank you. Other questions from the Planning and Zoning Commission at this time? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rue. Is there anyone from the Carlton Protection Trust or a representative from the Carlton Protection Trust who would like to say a few words? Okay, how about anyone from the general public? And again, I would encourage you to limit your comments to either the groundwater study or any new information that you've not previously provided to us. So anyone here in the courthouse in the Sophie Moise room who'd like to comment? Come on up and please state your name for the record.
Hi, my name's Luis Arches, and I live in the affected area. And hello again for the fourth time. And I won't repeat things I've said in the past, but I think I deserve to be able to tell my story. You know, I used to own a home in the Lower Rattlesnake for a while, for quite a few years, and I moved out to this area 17 years ago because I wanted to pursue a life of raising my own food, having an orchard. And although I love the Lower Rattlesnake, the lots are small. So I moved out here, and in the past 17 years, I've retired. And once I retired, I planted an orchard. I grow about 30% of everything I eat comes off of my property. When I moved there, it was full of knapweed, kochia, and a lot of other cheatgrass. I've been raising sheep and goats. You can't find a weed on my property, and I do not spray. Now, I've often heard that zoning is foundational to planning. I moved to this area with big plans for my life, to live the rest of my life out, farming my own food, living in a beautiful area with wildlife. They say the pit won't get any bigger, but when I moved there, I was told the pit wasn't going to get any bigger, and it was only 5 acres. Now look at it. And now they want to bring asphalt in, and I'm going to have to smell that. Now they want to do night operations, so I won't be able to open my windows at night. Most of my neighbors say the same thing. We open our windows at night to cool our houses off. We don't have central air conditioning. So if zoning is foundational to planning, we have zoning. The question is, would you allow this expansion to go into a zoned area? Would you want an asphalt plant within a couple hundred yards of your house? It might not pollute my groundwater, but you can sure smell it. It just, you know, I had plans to build a greenhouse this year and maybe put in some underground sprinklers for around my house. I've spent over $200,000 working, improving my property since I've owned it. That's over the cost of buying that property. I have not started on my greenhouse because if you guys allow this variance, I am not going to put a greenhouse in. I'm not going to put any more effort into my property. 17 years of effort down the drain. Okay? If you allow this to go in, I'm just looking at cutting and running. You know, I've got 20 acres in the Bitterroot Valley that I could go live on, but it's not zoned. I don't want to live there because I see what my neighbors bring in, junkyards and all kinds of stuff. So I would prefer to stay where I'm at. I think you need to know that I'm not the only one in this neighborhood that has worked a lot of years to improve their property, with the understanding that that gravel pit was never going to get any bigger than the 5 acres. So here we are. And you guys have been getting so far into the weeds on all this other stuff when it really just comes down to one thing. Should we allow an industrial business to move into an area that for almost 50 years has been zoned as one single family dwelling per 5 acres for agricultural uses? Most of the people I talk to, they're just like, I can't understand why they're dragging it out this long. It makes me wonder why you've been dragging out so long. I can't understand it. And I think it's a shame. I think the problem is you guys are afraid to make the decision because your vote says one thing. You either put more value on Western's ability to improve their bottom line over our ability to preserve our equity in our homes. it also makes it look like you're trying to, um, you're more worried about some hypothetical person moving to Montana, saving a few $100s on their costs of building their little $1 million McMansions. You are more concerned about that than you are over the potential effects. I'm not saying that there are, but potential effects to our air, our water, our wildlife, and just our way of life in this community. I think you guys need to know that. And I just wish that one way or the other, you would make a decision, because it's becoming a burden on us. I mean, now we got to get lawyers, and we got to come up with all money to pay lawyers, and we got, I mean, it's just for what? So that some people can save a little bit of money on their haul costs. Well, build homes on that 70 acres and the haul costs will be cheap. Thank you.
Thank you. This is called due process. That is why it is taking as long as it is. Additional public comment. Mr. Koppas, you're late. Is there anything that I already gave you the chance to say anything. Is there anything that you would like to add today?
Yeah, I apologize. For some reason, I had this at 9:30, so I thought I was right on time, but I appear to have been off the mark there. So yeah, I've been in negotiations with Alan McCormick on behalf of Western. They're working on a hydrologic report. I've given him a dozen things that we'd like to see in that report. We have not been able thus far to procure a report on our own, but Western and I, through negotiations, and we informed John Hart prior to this that we'd like additional time, obviously, to review that report. When they produce it, we'll need to obviously have somebody review that independently on our own. And that would cover the hydrologic aspect of this, which is scientific in nature. Obviously, there are inherently and fundamentally legal issues, which are separate and distinct from that. But we have committed to you and to them to continue to work forward to see if we can identify and or categorize what, if any, issues may arise in the hydrologic category concept. So we're working forward on that. I had told you 2 months ago, I thought we needed probably 6 months to make that happen. 2 months have gone by, no report has been produced. So looks like 6 months was about accurate. If they get it to us in the next month, we would need some time to have somebody review it. As you guys all can imagine, professionals in the engineering and hydrologic world are busy. So I have to have somebody have time to review that. So certainly we're able and willing to do that, and then to report back to you on the ways that we agree or disagree about that, and what we think, if any, mitigation could be made in relation to the hydrologic scientific aspect of this project. Again, that is obviously one issue that is before you, and that was one that was of concern to this body previously. So I appreciate the time to investigate that issue thoroughly. We obviously still have fundamental disagreements about the length of time that the project would occur. And so I talked to Alan about whether we could reach a compromise in relation to an end date, a date certain that the project would come to a conclusion. We weren't able to agree about that. So I don't think you guys had asked us to pursue sort of a settlement path here. And I don't think we're going to ultimately be able to resolve all of the issues here, just based on some sort of fundamental disagreements about how long this project would occur, and also just the length of time during each day in which it is going to occur, and how that fundamentally affects all of the residential community that lives there. However, I do think there's information still to be gleaned that is relevant to my clients and to you all in relation to the hydrology of the site, and how this activity, which is known to cause significant groundwater pollution, may or may not have that effect in this location. So we are requesting additional time to review that information once we get it. And I think probably an appropriate thing to do would be for us to report back to you all through John Hart once I receive that information and have had time to have somebody else review it. and then we could see if there's something that we can present to you at that time. So I'm here to request additional time before you all make a decision, and that is supported by also the applicant. So that's what I have to present.
Thank you. And could you state your name for the record, please?
Graham Coppice.
Thank you. Is there additional public comment beginning here in the Sophie Moise room in the Missoula County Courthouse? Any additional public comment on this item? How about anyone online who would like to comment? Okay. Questions or discussion amongst the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Quick
Yes.
question. Is there, maybe I missed this, are there monitoring wells south of the project area in the neighborhood or?
Mr. Rue?
Okay, so the
that
monitoring
is
wells
a,
are just
come on up to
I'm
the
sorry.
microphone, please. And this is Dave Rue.
So the monitoring wells are just on Western's property, correct?
They're not, the wells that we instrumented are Western's water supply wells, as well as a domestic well that is serves a residence that is on Western's property. They are not purpose-built monitoring wells. As John stated earlier, there's currently no asphalt plant there. Monitoring wells are not required for gravel pits that do not have asphalt plants. So they're not currently installed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Jenny. So we've heard a number of additional proposed mitigations today that we're just seeing for the first time, at least we are. So will those be circulated amongst staff in some way to provide some review and comment on?
Thank you for asking. I have not seen those until this morning as well. And with the, I took some screenshots and my assessment was that they will need to be at least reworded at the very least to evolve them into conditions of approval that might be applied to a variance approval. I am not certain that all of them will be able to become conditions that are actually enforceable. So we'll need to take a look at those. We will need more time.
Okay. Yeah, Jamie, come on up. And I'm assuming anything that was presented today will be available to us to inspect.
Thank you. Jamie Erbacher with WGM. We do have some marked up condition language taking from the May 2nd hearing. And so some modifications, strike throughs, and I can pass that on to Jenny after this meeting for the public record.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions or discussion by the commission? Shane.
Yeah, in regard to the additional mitigation efforts, are those for the entire pit or just the pit that you're asking for the variance on?
Come on up, Jamie, Mr. Kappas, whoever.
So the mitigation would be for the entire pit if it expands.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Tyler.
Actually, I have two questions. Both I see Alan and Graham are both here, so I'm going to throw this first one out to both of you. In the mid 80s, there was a case, Missoula County versus American Asphalt, that dealt with a fairly similar provision in the other part of zoning. Obviously, that statutory language was added to this part of zoning much later in time, in I think 2019 or 2021. But it specifically said that we don't have the authority to regulate asphalt or gravel mining. And so I am curious to hear both of your thoughts on how case law has evolved or whether that would apply to this case or not. Basically what effect that would have in this operation. And then I have a second question after that.
Mr. McCormick, you've not spoken yet. Let's start with you.
Good morning, commissioners. Planning and Zoning Commission members, Alan McCormick, Arlington Lana Robinson, representing Western Materials. Unfortunately, that statutory provision applies to Part 2 zoning, not Part 1 zoning. And Part 1 zoning is silent on sort of regulating gravel industries. So there is some debate. There is a provision in Part 1 zoning that specifically deals with the regulation of, or the extraction of minerals. And there is some debate in Montana about whether gravel is a mineral. I think most likely the case law should be read that it is not considered to be a mineral for these purposes, but reasonable minds can differ. Any other questions while I'm up here?
I'm going to follow up and just say the provision that was added to Part 2 zoning is, I would say, fairly similar. Do you view the subsequent, because again, the case in the 80s found that gravel was a mineral, but it appears that subsequent case law has maybe said it's not. Do you see any resolution of that conflict, or is it still kind of up in the air?
If it was clear, we wouldn't be asking for a variance. So in part, we're asking for a variance because it's not clear and because the case law seems to be trending to the side that says gravel is not a mineral for purposes of these kinds of analysis.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. Kopis, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, and we provided full legal analysis of that question in the original memos that we submitted both in the first April meeting and the May meeting. So you can look for the written analysis to your question there. But the long answer, or the short answer rather, is I agree with Alan that this is not considered a mineral and is totally able to be regulated under Montana law through the zoning process. That was intentional. And that's specifically due to the impacts on residential neighborhoods. And there has been subsequent case law on that issue as well. So, and I would remind you again that this body did actually take the affirmative step of implementing zoning in previous cases to prevent this exact issue from happening, which is kind of the inverse of what's happening here. We're questioning whether we should bend zoning to allow for non-conforming use, and in the past, this body has taken the affirmative step of implementing zoning to prevent this exact same thing. So I feel like that's relevant for you all to consider.
Thank you, Josh.
It's a question for Jenny about bending zoning and the difference between Part 1 and Part 2 zoning.
And what's the question?
How are those two types of zoning different?
There are two different sections of law relative to zoning and land use. And Part 1, as I understand it, is older. It involves this Planning and Zoning Commission body and the county commissioners, whereas Part 2, which is much of what the zoning is in the Missoula Valley, it goes to the planning board and the county commissioners for action. It has Board of Adjustment variances and special exceptions, whereas Part 1, because it's older and a lot more ambiguous, it kind of leaves a lot to interpretation on how to implement it and apply it in terms of, let's say, variances. We've been talking about that a lot, that the statute is similar, but they're not the same. And so there's different interpretation. And I probably would also, because I'm trying to interpret law, which is not totally my strength, might ask John to give you a little bit more clarity on the differences of those two sections of law.
John, is there anything you'd like to add? This is John Hart, Deputy County Attorney.
Not really. One is initiated I call it sort of the grassroots approach to zoning. And the other one is Part 2 is initiated by the county planning board and is more of something that then you consider and implement. And I don't know, the Part 1 zoning was the first type of zoning that was introduced in Montana in the 40s or 50s. And then Part 2 zoning came later. I don't know how much later.
I could also add, Josh, one of the results of John's description of those two zones, part 1 and part 2, results in very different kind of regulations. And as I said, part 1 is harder to apply and implement because when requested by citizens who are not trained in this and certainly don't have time or money to develop a whole set of regulations that evaluates presumably every aspect of development that can be considered, versus part 2, where we have chapters on building types and cluster developments, and what do you do if there are non-conforming uses, and what do you do if they don't meet a certain definition. I mean, it's 400 pages long. Andrew was hoping it would be 420 pages long, but it's only 400 pages long. And the versus part 1 zoning, which might be 1 page. And so that all of that other 399 pages are kind of left to best interpretation. So in this case, because state law and the zoning district has not prohibited use variances, we are in this situation.
Yeah. And with part 2 zoning, state law does prohibit those?
Your local regulations that you adopted in July of 2022 have stated you cannot do a use variance. So one possibility for, is to consider adopting a resolution to not allow use variances in part 1, but that doesn't exist right now.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other discussion? Yes, Tyler.
I have one last question, and John's probably going to hate me for it, but it's to John. I guess one question I would have is, at the last hearing, Mr. Koppas, you indicated that you guys were planning on, the Carlton Protection Trust was planning on challenging the existing permit. And I don't know whether that's still the plan or not, but I'm curious, from John's perspective, if we were to approve this variance and they do challenge the permit for the existing pit, does the variance allow them to then just move over and mine the new pit? In other words, are we foreclosing a legal remedy for them if they were to successfully challenge the existing permit?
I don't know.
I guess my comment to that would be whatever conditions we look to approve. If it's part of a package, I guess, is I would say that if for some reason the existing permit is found to be not legal, that this would not then extend to the new permit, the new site, essentially. I'm not sure that made any sense. It makes sense in my mind, though.
So Tyler, this question for you, I guess, if the scenario you're talking about came to pass, would Western have to apply for a new permit on the neighboring land?
I guess what I'm thinking, and this is, Jenny, obviously you'd have to wordsmith this, but if for some reason the existing permit were revoked because a court said that it was not valid, that we wouldn't be, if we approve this variance, it wouldn't give them the ability to basically just shift operations to the new site and continue to mine that because we've granted a variance. In other words, this was initially a grandfathered in use, but we are looking to make it an actual variance that's approved by this body. And well, I guess the county commissioners technically, but that one would not negate the other, in other words.
Thanks, Tyler. Oh, yes, I saw that hand hovering back there. Come on up.
Hi, Mike Smith with WGM. Tyler, I think, I'm not sure that this answers your question or not, but the process with the permitting of the pit, there is an existing permit. It's got multiple amendments to it. This would be an amendment, so the actual number of the permit will not change. So that permit that is in effect now is still the permit. It'll just have different parameters. So I'm not sure if that addresses what you're looking for or not.
Tyler.
I think what my concern is if that existing permit for some reason were found to not be legal, us granting this variance could allow you to just apply for a new permit and you would now have a zoning compliance because we granted a variance. And so what I am suggesting is that as a condition of granting this variance, that it is reliant on that existing permit being valid and just expanding versus being a new permit.
I see. So I guess in that instance, if we were to apply for a new permit after that happened, that would include getting zoning approval. So I guess that's probably what you're talking about if that creates that pathway.
Essentially, yes, that you would have to come back to this body to get another variance approval to, in other words, if the Carlton Protection Trust were successful in shutting down the existing gravel operation, that you wouldn't then just be able to move to a new site and operate that as a new gravel operation, that you would have to come back to this.
Within ZD40.
Yes, correct.
Don't know the answer. Sorry.
No, thank you. Jenny, would you mind putting that on your list of things to look into as far as our ability to create a condition of approval that would be along those lines? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Yes, I'm Alan Foss. I have a question for the waterman.
Why don't you, all questions come right here to me. So,
Okay, I have a question for the waterman.
yeah, why don't you address your, yeah,
It
tell me.
seems to me, because I'm having low water right now, I am slightly higher than the pit. Wouldn't it do us right if they had their little test wells above the pit and below the pit so that we could tell the difference between the water that's going into the pit area and the water that's coming out of it after they pumped it? I'm already having not problems, but I'm not getting my water pressure that I have had for 40 years. That's my question.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rue, do you want to take a stab at this hydrology question?
At the opening portion of this meeting, John did commit that if this variance or pit expansion went through, that they would install monitoring wells along the.
And could you pull the mic a little closer to your mouth there?
Sorry. Western did commit to installing monitoring wells on the up gradient portion of the pit expansion area, should this be approved. So his suggestion is would occur. With regards to well yield problems, that can be caused by a number of things. There's no scientific reason with Western's wells where they're currently located why they would impact anybody to the south. If this gentleman is having water yield issues that aren't consistent with the last 40 years of use, it's more likely to be attributed to the condition of the physical well or pumping equipment in the well. This Western has not increased their water use recently, so there's no reason why there would be any off-site impacts.
Okay, thank you. And I would suggest, sir, if you have questions related to our hydrologist, why don't you, after the meeting, tie in with one another? Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Mr. Root, could I ask you a question? If we decide to keep this going for a number of months to gather more information and have the CPT folks comment on your report, will there be any new wells, or is this just as is now with data that reflects greater period of time passing?
As I understand, there are no immediate plans to install any new wells. I believe those wells would be contingent on developing the pit expansion.
Thank you. Tyler.
I guess I'll ask one follow-up. Sorry, Dave. What I'm hearing from the landowners is they want you to monitor where they are. Is there any, I mean, you'd have to have a legal right to install a monitor there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. You would need a legal access agreement. There's a number of issues with collecting water quality samples from domestic wells, mainly that Western doesn't have control of them. So there's no guarantee that if you find something in the well, there's no guarantee of how it arrived there. Theoretically, somebody could dump motor oil down their well and say, look, it's from the gravel pit. So that's why typically monitoring wells that are on gravel pits. By the way, that's not typical at all. I do a lot of work in the mining industry and specifically in gravel. I've been to at least a dozen different gravel pits this year for various projects, and I think one of them has had monitoring wells, and that was because of an offsite issue that pre-existed that mine. So yeah, it's not a good idea to monitor water quality with people's domestic wells. And in addition, those upgradient wells that would be installed contingent on this variance and pit expansion, they would also monitor influent water quality to the pit. As I showed earlier with the map, the residences are located cross and up gradient of the pit, which means that water from the septic fields at the houses may enter into the corner of Western's property. So it is possible that those wells would not only demonstrate that there are no impacts from the pit, there may be impacts from offsite that are showing up at the pit. So the wells would kind of serve both purposes.
Thank you. And also not a good idea to dump motor oil down your domestic well. So, Mr. Koppas.
So I think this entire conversation highlights a significant issue that we want to consider, which is that it is very easy in the hydrologic world to explain somebody else's problem as too attenuated to have a conclusive answer. This is something that I see in litigating these cases all of the time. And there are two components to the water issue that we want to have looked at. One is the quantity side and two is the quality side. And they have very different sets of influences and very different sets of legal issues associated with them. From the quantity side, we have people's water rights. There's a prior appropriation system that deals with that and handles that through the legal system. But from the quality side, there is no regulation of this system. And the hydrologist who spoke is correct that these monitoring wells are not required by DEQ in association with implementation of the Open Cut Act. However, most of these other sites are not located in a residential neighborhood that have zoning associated with them. And so that's why we're here and that's why we're discussing this, because there is a legal parameter that says this is not an appropriate place for this activity. And so to be clear, what is happening in other locations, I really think has no bearing on what should be happening here, because we're in a totally different framework for how to consider whether this is an appropriate activity or not. So from the quantity side, surely we need to look at whether the expansion of the acreage and whether the expansion of production at this facility is going to require more water. I mean, that's a pretty simple question. It makes basic sense that if you're going to produce more material and convey more material through this manufacturing facility, it's going to require additional water to process that. So we want to know how much. So it simply is not believable that there's not going to be an increase in the consumptive volume of water that's actually pumped out of the ground. But we do need to know how much. And then we need to know how those wells that are going to be pumping the increased volumes are going to relate directly to the aquifer system that neighboring wells are located in. So that's going to be looking at the depths of wells that are in the area in relation to the depths of the wells that are at issue and will be used in this production facility. And then we need to know how those wells are actually hydrologically connected. So if they're at differing levels in the geology, we need to know, is there leakage between those hydrologic units, and at what rate, how fast, the transmissivity, which is how fast the water is actually going to translate on a lateral level, moving through the aquifer system. And then that basically they can model a cone of depression, which is going to indicate how much water is going to be pulled towards those wells that they're pumping and whether that's going to intercept these other sources. So it's very possible, and this is what I hope we're going to see from this report, is to have modeling of all of this information so we can present it to you. And maybe it's not going to impact our clients' drinking water wells in the sense of quantity, in which case that's great. Everybody can rest assured that their water rights are not going to be impacted. But for them to stand up here and say that this is categorically not possible is factually inaccurate. And that's why we would have to have somebody else come up here and present to you about why they're wrong about that. So that's the quantity side. The quality side is certainly a little bit more complicated in the sense that we have impacts to drinking water systems, which are separate and distinct from that pulling of water in the cone of depression to those wells. And so what we need to look at is how the pit can act as a conduit for contaminants from the site to actually be transmitted into groundwater, and then how that will or will not move in a lateral direction out. So that is going to look at both essentially how this location could act as, like I said, a conduit to shallow aquifers, and if there's going to be leakage into deeper aquifers and where that water will end up going. And so that's all information that we don't have right now and that we hope we can gain through some sort of a hydrologic scientific report. And obviously, we're going to need to fact check that information and have somebody else look at it. It is obviously well known. You can pay somebody to write a report that says anything. We see it in court all the time. So we do need to have some sort of a response period to that information. And we'd request to have that essentially be scheduled out with you once we get that information. So
Tyler.
Actually, honestly, the reason why I asked is because I was wondering, what are they not doing now that you would like them to do? Because they seem receptive to trying to do more. So is there something they should be doing in your mind that they are not doing in terms of this report?
Well, I sent Alan a whole list of information that we'd like to see, and I haven't heard whether that will or will not occur. So I'm hopeful that it will. But if it doesn't occur, we'll certainly be back here to tell you about all the problems associated with that. So.
Josh and then Shane.
Gentleman from Western.
Did you have a question for Mr. Cops? Okay, go ahead, Shane. And
You had just mentioned that you sent Mr. McCormick a list of dozen items. Could you share those or share that list of items?
Sure. It'd be easier if I just read the email that I sent Alan to you. Okay, I said, the Open Cut Act requires identification and analysis of seasonal fluctuation in groundwater, which is true. It requires a 25-foot separation barrier between seasonal high groundwater and the bottom floor of mining. And we'd like to know the relative distance between seasonal high groundwater and the deepest depth of mining. If these calculations are going to be based on wells off-site, we would need to know the GWIC database numbers for those wells and the distance from those wells to the site. If you're using static water levels from well logs, we will need to know the month in which those wells were drilled and the year. As this is all required by the Open Cut Act, I don't assume it's a problem to share with us. We are, of course, interested in that information, but we are also interested in additional hydrologic issues that are not analyzed by the Open Cut Act following House Bill 599. Most notably, we are concerned about the exposed and porous alluvial soils acting as a direct conduit for contaminants from the site into shallow groundwater. We are concerned that shallow groundwater is connected to deeper groundwater, and we'd like to see an analysis of the confined, semi-confined, or leaky confined aquifers in the vicinity of the site. We would like to know the rate of leakage, the transmissivity values associated with the groundwater in the area, and if and where surface water discharges are occurring from those aquifers. From a water quantity perspective, we would like to know information related to the groundwater wells that are used as a part of the facility. I would like to know the water right numbers associated with the project site, the depth of the wells, and the individual and combined flow rates and volumes of all. We are interested to know if there's pumping logs or well records that have been kept, what the volumes associated with the various wells are on an annual basis, how that water is used on the site, and whether increases in flow rate and volumes can be expected as a part of the future expansion. These are the questions that then lead us to want to know the size and scope of the cone of depression and whether that cone of depression will propagate through any geologic layers toward the surface and as far as horizontally. With that information, we'll be able to analyze the potential for various mitigation needs. For one, from a quantity side, we could potentially negotiate a subordination agreement between our clients, a cessation of use plan, or an agreement to be bound by call. So that is what I would envision as some sort of a settlement agreement that could occur from the quantity side, which would essentially recognize that our clients have senior water rights to those, and that if they're having well problems, they would make a formal call, and that there would either be some cessation or restriction of use that would occur at the mining site. And the reason that water users often enter into some sort of a cessation of use or a call plan like that is because of the ability to say that essentially causation is attenuated at any point in the future. And that's a major issue when you litigate water rights related issues, is that it's very easy for some junior water user to come along and say, well, my well's not your problem, right? There are 500 other wells in the vicinity of this project and I am not the problem. You need to go after all of these other people. And that is why junior users that are either asking for a new water right or an expansion of a water right are required to essentially have the burden of proof under the Water Use Act to show as a first matter that they're not going to adversely affect anyone else. And while Western's not here asking for a new water right, they are asking for an expansion of a facility that may or may not require additional water to be used. And that's what we want to know. And so those are the specific questions that I asked.
Thank you. Since this question was, or this correspondence was addressed to Mr. McCormick, is there anything that you'd like to add? Yes, there is. The shaking of the head, yes. Thank you, Mr. Koppas.
Well, this sounds good. This is Alan McCormick for Western Materials. The list sounds good until you realize the Act doesn't require a 25-foot separation from groundwater. The Act doesn't require a lot of those other things. You don't do cones of depression and analyze those sorts of things unless you find out that there's actually some possibility of a connection between the two. And so there's quite a lot of stuff that's being asked here that does not have a fundamental basis for being asked or need to be asked. And we passed that list along to our hydrogeologist for comment and to see what could be included in the study that he's already doing. They don't have a hydrogeologist. They don't have any data. They don't have any attempt. I secured a hydrogeologist in about 5 days after the last meeting. I did it without talking to them because I had some concerns about the timing and wanting to be independent. We did not engage WGM to do it. We hired an independent environmental, and we hired them through my office as an expert, and got that ball rolling to provide you with the data that we have. Took a little longer to get the equipment to start doing the study, and that's why we don't have a report for you today. They still don't have a hydrogeologist. That was something that they promised. And they asked us if could we participate in your study, and I said, no, but we'll give it to you. And why don't you get your own hydrogeologist for this stuff? I don't appreciate at all this impugning of our hydrogeologists' qualifications and professionalism by saying you can pay anybody any amount of money to get the report that you want. Of course, data can be manipulated, but let's not start having that kind of a discussion in public of just impugning someone's professional qualifications and professionalism by making those kinds of allegations in a hearing like this. Certainly anybody can take the data and take a look at it and see whether it's accurate or not, but let's do that rather than having a conversation here about things that we are or are not doing that aren't even required by the Act, and making some prejudgments about the quality of the reporting and the information that we're trying to give you.
Thank you. Josh.
I wanted to ask questions of the gentleman from Western.
Yes. Mr. Kappas.
And this is really just so I can be clear here. We're hearing the words expansion. So I was understanding this, that you had a certain amount of years left in the pit that you're currently mining, 20 to 30, kind of depending on the pace of construction and how much gravel is actually there. Is that accurate?
Up to 20, we figure, yeah.
Up to 20, okay. I only was adding the other because if the pace of construction goes much more slowly, let's say we have an economic downturn, you don't have the demand or the need to pull gravel as quickly as you are right now. So is it the case that if you have access to mine gravel to the land we're talking about, would you be actively mining more gravel than you are now, or would you be replacing what you are now after the 20 years passes, 20 to 30 years, with the new land? Is this more of an extension or an expansion?
It's more of an extension of gravel availability into the future. We will be immediately reclaiming. I keep saying 20 acres, but some of the acreage is on the highway. So I think it's 18 bonded acres to the north. We're going to reclaim immediately. So we'll be shifting our mining into the west, and it will just be at the pace for which the economy, as you state, is utilizing gravel.
Is there some way to guarantee, for lack of a better word, that you don't use more water than you are using now? If it's the case that you're replacing you're placing old land with new land in terms of actively mined ground. So if you're actively, I'm just going to make it up, if you're actively mining 30 acres of gravel now, and as that goes away, you slowly add a new 30 acres, from a novice's or a lay person's point of view, it seems like, well, you'd be using the same amount of gear, the same amount of water, the same amount of everything. You're just transferring the space from the east to the west in this case.
That's what we're envisioning. I mean, to say we won't need more water in the future, I'd hate to put that as an absolute, but I know we won't need nearly close to as much water as that area would need if it was developed, as the zoning says, as 1 per 5 acres. We won't be even close to 20, I believe would be 24 new houses. We won't be even ever close to that amount of volume of water. So at the point when that gets subdivided, it's going to have a lot more water use than our gravel pit ever will.
Is it possible for you to agree to not actively mining any more land than you are now? You just transfer, as one chunk of land is kind of spent, you move to the west, as opposed to mining more land than you are right now.
Well, and I think that's part of the mitigation we're saying, right, is that when we move into the new area, we're going to reclaim acre for acre. So yeah, so we will open up 20 new acres as we reclaim that 20 to the north or 18 to the north.
So it seems
it's going to be about, the footprint's going to be no different than it is today under that mitigation.
So it seems that the water use could be the same as well.
It's going to be very close to the same. That's why I'm saying we could put a number to it. I wouldn't want to put the exact number that we are today.
Yeah.
But it will definitely be way less than 24 new homes.
Do you think it's possible, after conferring with your folks, to put a number or put a range where this is where you are now and you are committing to remain within that range?
That we would stay under a certain number.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's great.
And I think, once we see the water study, that'll help us to kind of see if there's an effect at a certain amount.
Yeah.
And then we would stay under that amount. And so that would help us come to the number that you're asking.
Thanks for the patience with amateur questions.
Thank you. Shane.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Kappas, just a few more. And Commissioner Slotnick, I was thinking kind of the same thing you were. And I just wanted to maybe ask another question. And what are you using water for? I'm assuming if you have a concrete batch plant, right? There's some going there. If you got a wash plant, there's some going there. And as I understood, when you do have your wash plant operating, you kind of recycling that water. So it's not like you're pulling out of the ground constantly to run your wash plant. But I just like to get everybody up here a sense of what water you're using, what's it being used for?
Yeah. So the main uses are for the concrete plant. the wash plant. The wash plant, we pump into retention ponds so we can recycle that water as much as we can. And then we use water for dust control. And so those are the three uses. We do not have a restroom there. We use porta pots for restrooms. So those are the three uses. So the reason it could go up slightly is if we're getting more demand and we have to wash some more gravel, or we have more concrete production. That's where the fluctuation would be. But like I said, it's that water use is far less than 24 new homes.
And you would be willing, after conferring with your folks, to put a top end on that?
Yes, we would be willing to put a top end of what our water needs
that would
ever be.
And hopefully that top end would reflect kind of where you are now.
Yeah.
One additional question. So a little bit different than groundwater, but do you have any sense of what percentage of the overall gravel needs of the Missoula area this pit provides? Because we've heard a lot in terms of this is a critical asset for the future of the Missoula Valley for decades to come. It would if you don't have it now, it would be helpful to have some sense by way of scale what this actually contributes to the need.
I just we'd have to find out what the total gravel sales are from all gravel pits, but I can tell you we sell out of there and out of the Mullen pit, because we sell that gravel both out of the Mullen pit and the Lolo pit. We transfer up to our Mullen pit about 200,000 tons a year. And I will see what I can do to better give a kind of what that value means.
Okay, that would be.
I can't just right off the cuff come up with a good analogy or conceptual way to explain it.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. Tyler.
This is maybe a question for both Graham and John. I heard one of the residents say they would like an answer right now. Graham, you're saying that you would like more time to study the hydrological reports. John, I guess what is the time frame of what's reasonable from both parties in terms of us making a decision so that we have a better sense of when we need to make a decision?
I think I will defer this one to Alan because he has a better understanding of the timing on the contracts. And I know we do have a lot of other things we need to do, so that, this has been going on now for almost a year, I believe, is when we put in the application. Time flies on me, so. But I will turn that over to Alan to give a better answer.
Thank you, Mr. Kappes. Alan.
Could you give me a better sense of your question?
I get
heard it.
Yeah,
I wasn't quite sure what you were asking.
What I'm asking is, we had one resident who said, just make a decision already.
Sure.
I imagine you guys would like us to make a decision already, but I also recognize, Graham, I think you have a valid concern of wanting to see the hydrological report. So they're sort of conflicting, make a decision already or not. What is your guys' timeline in terms of when you really need a decision made? And likewise, Graham, what is your timeline? You're probably less looking for a decision right away, but I just kind of want to get a sense of do we need to make a decision by August, by September, by December, when?
Sure. Sooner rather than later. I think everybody in this room would like to be done with this issue. Probably the most would be the 5 of you sitting there. The information that we promised to provide some information. We told you at the last meeting that we provide information. We told you that we would reach out to the other side to talk about possible resolution. We've done that. We just don't have all of that information yet. We tried to scramble so that we could get it to you for this meeting, and just with getting the equipment and the like, it took longer than needed. I don't think we need a whole lot more time to complete the study, put that information together, and make it available. So I think that's a matter of a couple of weeks, not months, to be able to do that. What's a reasonable time frame to give the members of the public an opportunity to review that? a couple weeks after that, who knows? I'm sure Graham has different feelings on that, wanting to get a hydrogeologist to take a look at it. But we can be prepared to provide you with the information. And in the meantime, because we have not received or been able to successfully engage in actual discussions about mitigation with the CPT folks. We've tried. That doesn't seem like that's going to be very practical to do. And so that's why you saw some additional mitigation being suggested this morning of hearing what their concerns are, trying to find some solutions to it, even without those discussions. So we've been moving that along as best we can.
I'm going to ask one clarifying. And this also for you, Graham, do you have any hard dates by which a decision needs to be made? Like contract dates?
Yes. I mean, there is an agreement in play. We've talked about this before. There's an agreement in place. I don't know the exact date when that current agreement expires. I think it's August, and so a decision prior to August, mid-August would be great. If we know it's going to be 10 days after that or something like that, then we can make a request to extend those contracts. It would probably be unfair to be saying to them, hey, let's wait till December and keep doing that.
Mr. Koppas. Thank you, Alan.
So I think that you have everything before you that you need today to just deny this application. So we'll just start with that. There has been significant testimony and evidence presented through the last two presentations about how this is not in the public interest, about how the applicant has not carried its affirmative duty. So members of the public that stood up here and said they want a decision today denying this, I fully understand. I'm coming at it from a little more holistic perspective of looking at all of the information that you all have requested. And so my request for additional time is based on an opportunity to review what they're going to present. And that's based on an assumption that you guys want to see that information. If you don't want to see that information, you certainly can make that decision today. But we have engaged a hydrogeologist. It's the folks that I've used for a number of these projects. They're out of Helena. It's Hydro Solutions, Inc. And they are a very competent organization. However, we have not taken the steps to produce an affirmative study of our own, A, because that's super expensive, and B, because we're not up here asking you for a use variance to an established zoning requirement. So what I'm asking for is the opportunity to have somebody who's competent in this field of science review the information and identify if there are problems with that information that you should be aware of. And so that is going to take a little bit of time. I didn't hear a date that we'd get this report, but I'd say that at the very least, we'd need a month after that to make that happen. So we could essentially let you know when we get it, and then we could set a hearing date after that. Or you guys can just make a decision today. And I mean, all of the information that's been presented to you has a very clear path and a defensible legal path for you to deny this application that's in front of you. There is not going to be exposure if you do in that way, but in the inverse, I would suggest that there's going to be significant exposure legally for this body if it grants this use variance. And this may be tied up in court for quite some time afterwards. And so there's an easy path and there's a hard path. And that's obviously all your prerogative.
Thank you. Jenny or Cheryl, do you have any sense of when we might be able to reconvene, and recognizing that it's going to be predicated on the groundwater study actually being completed by that time, and also that a special meeting like this does not have to occur during a normally scheduled public meeting on a Thursday?
Well, so I have been kind of using the Thursdays as a guide, but there are also weeks where that Thursday may not work, but also weeks where commissioners or people are gone. So I did ask you to bring your calendars. The first opportunity, given what I've heard, that I would throw out there as a possible date is actually would be like today, a special commission meeting in the morning of August 15. like a 9 a.m. on Thursday, August 15. That's your third Thursday where you don't have a normal.
Do either the Carlton Protection Trust or Western have thoughts on that? Would August 15th work? I got a thumbs up from Alan McCormick. Thumbs up from Mr. Coppice. Oh, not good. Okay, that was close. That was close.
Also, it looks like Tyler's not here that day. I do just want to make you aware that for the Planning and Zoning Commission to be able to take action with a quorum, you will need to have 4 Planning and Zoning Commission members. I would really love to have all 5 of you, though.
Since we have so many parties, and I'm not sure if GSI has their schedule fully in hand, do we need to? I mean, ideally, we could figure this out right now, but
if we don't figure this out right now, it does mean that, and it's part of the job, but I'll have to go back out and put posters, adjacent property owner letters, legal ad, those type of things. And I was hoping to be able to pick a date, much as we've done in the last 3 or 4 meetings, to a date certain so we could announce it here today.
How about August 14th?
I'm out of town all that week, as a heads up. So I would, if we could do later, that would probably be better for me. Like
the week of August 19, sometime.
I would have to be on a Monday or a Tuesday for me.
I'm more August 26th-ish, actually even beyond that. So September might be better for me.
How about August 29th?
I'm supposed to be gone August 28th to September 19.
Oh.
Jenny's gone.
Like a 3-week.
When is GSI available?
What about the week of August 5th?
August 5th. I got a thumbs up from GSI. August 5th. Well, I'm hearing that the groundwater study should be completed well before then. Is that a fair assumption? Yes, that's a fair assumption. August 5th. Alan, no.
Or the week of.
How about the week, that week?
So then, if that's not sufficient time, we were looking at the next opportunity was the week of September 23rd, but I believe, Dave, you are gone, or maybe it's Josh is gone. And we're trying to beat hunting season. So what about, and then September 30, October 1, October 2. What about, yeah.
I know that's a lot farther out than the applicant was looking for and might require an extension on your. Okay, we've got some conferring going on in the back.
It looks like the Sophie Moise room is not available all week.
What is in here?
It starts with me, health.
Can we?
I think we could.
We can find a different spot for it starts with me.
Yeah.
We will find a different spot for it starts with me.
So we're looking potentially after some conference, October 1 or 2. Can you do October 2? For the August 5th.
Mr. Coppice, if they get the report within a week, can you roll into action evaluating it? Okay, how about we set the tentative date early August? What was that again?
August 5th,
August 6th or 7th?
August 6th or 7th. Okay. Does anyone have any special requests for August 6 or 7, a special time that works better? Otherwise, we could just pick.
Commissioners, just so you know, I won't be available for that meeting. I think I've proven to be singularly unhelpful, so set the meeting for the first full week of August and
Okay.
we'll have someone else staff it.
What about August 6th at 9 a.m.? Tuesday.
We can
Okay.
adjust that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. August 6th, 10 a.m. in this room,
10 a.m. is good. Or 9.
or 9?
If you want to just keep your admin meeting and then come, I mean, the less you have to shift around, the better, I think. So is 10 better? It doesn't.
We'll have to cancel it regardless. This is not going to take an hour. Oh. Okay, let's try this again. Would 2 p.m. on the afternoon of August 6th work? Okay. Let's. In a week, within a week of today. Is that going to be achievable, GSI? Okay. Yes. August 6th, 2 p.m.
This room. Sophie Moe's room.
And between now and then, we'll be taking a look at the proposed additional mitigations, see how that aligns with conditions of approval. Get that out for comment. Okay, any other questions from the Planning and Zoning Commission? Okay, we will recess as the Planning and Zoning Commission and reconvene as the Missoula Board of County Commissioners. Is there any other business to come before the commission today? Seeing none, we will be adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.